Every day, millions of objects arrive somewhere at a specific time, not eventually, not roughly. At a particular hour, on a particular date, within a narrow window that someone else is already planning around. A container ship reaches port at dawn. A truck is scheduled to meet it 3 hours later. A warehouse slot opens for 45 minutes. A retail system expects inventory to scan in before the next cycle closes. None of these moments are dramatic. They rarely appear in headlines. Most people never see them at all. But together, they form the clock that runs the global economy. Modern trade is often described in terms of movement. Goods traveling across oceans, products flowing through supply chains, materials circulating through markets. What actually matters more than movement is timing. A shipment that arrives late is not just delayed. It collides with everything that was scheduled to happen after it. Labor shifts are missed. Dock space goes unused. Trucks wait with nowhere to go. Inventory sits in the wrong place at the wrong moment, losing value by the hour. Distance can be priced. Fuel can be budgeted. Time, once missed, is much harder to recover. Ports are not just places where ships dock. They are appointment books. Every berth, crane, truck gate, and storage yard operates on a schedule that assumes everything else will arrive when promised. Most of the time, those promises are kept. That reliability is what makes modern abundance feel effortless. Store shelves refill overnight. Replacement parts appear when ordered. Seasonal goods arrive on time, year after year, as if the system were simply there waiting. The complexity behind that reliability is easy to overlook because it rarely announces itself. When a product is available, nothing feels remarkable. When it is missing, the absence feels sudden and personal. What disappears first is not the system, but the illusion that it was simple. Behind every available item is a sequence of commitments made by people who never meet one another. A shipping line agrees to a port window. A port schedules labor. A distributor times deliveries. A retailer forecasts demand weeks or months in advance. These commitments are layered on top of one another, forming a structure that works only if time behaves predictably. The modern economy is not built on stockpiles. It is built on coordination. Warehouses no longer exist to hold goods indefinitely. They exist to move them through. Inventory is not stored as insurance. It is scheduled as a liability to be minimized. This is not recklessness. It is optimization. Reducing storage frees capital. Tight schedules lower costs. Precision replaces slack. The system becomes faster, cheaper, and more efficient. It also becomes less forgiving. When timing slips, the effects are rarely immediate. They surface downstream, where nothing looks obviously wrong until suddenly everything does. A store runs out of an item that was abundant last week. A factory pauses production for lack of a single component. A port appears congested even though ships are moving steadily through it. The problem is not motion, it is misalignment. To understand why modern economies feel both resilient and fragile, you have to look past the ships and trucks and warehouses themselves. You have to look at the clock they all depend on. Because the most important infrastructure in global trade is not steel or concrete or fuel. It is the shared agreement about when things are supposed to happen. Part 1. Before time was the constraint. Before time became the dominant pressure in global trade, distance was. Goods moved when they could, not when they were scheduled to. Ships departed when cargo was assembled. They arrived when weather, currents, and chance allowed. Delays were not considered failures. They were expected conditions. Ports reflected this reality. They were not tightly sequenced environments. They were places to wait. Ships anchored offshore for days or weeks. Cargo sat in warehouses until buyers were ready. Labor adjusted to arrivals rather than the other way around. Slack was not a flaw. It was a feature. Inventory existed to absorb uncertainty. Warehouses were buffers, not throughput machines. They smoothed variation, protected against loss, and bought time when something went wrong upstream. This shaped how businesses thought about risk. If demand shifted, goods were already nearby. If a shipment arrived late, existing stock could cover the gap. Capital was tied up in inventory, but stability was gained in return. Time mattered, but it was flexible. Delays were inconvenient rather than destabilizing. A ship arriving a week late disrupted plans, but it rarely unraveled entire systems. Schedules adjusted around reality instead of enforcing it. This model was slower, but it was forgiving. It also had limits. As trade expanded, holding large inventories became expensive. Storage required space, labor, and security. Goods tied up in warehouses could not be invested elsewhere. Capital sat idle while waiting for uncertainty to resolve itself. The cost of slack grew as economies scaled. At the same time, demand patterns became more complex. Markets diversified, product cycles shortened, variety increased. Holding everything, everywhere, all the time became impractical. The old model worked when goods were few, cycles were long, and markets were local or regional. It strained under the weight of global scale. Distance was no longer the main challenge. Coordination was. Businesses began to realize that waiting was expensive in ways that were not immediately visible. Idle inventory represented lost opportunity. Warehouses masked inefficiencies rather than eliminating them. Time spent sitting still was time not generating value. The pressure to reduce that waste did not come from technology alone. It came from economics. As competition increased, margins tightened. Companies looked for ways to lower costs without sacrificing reach. Faster movement meant quicker turnover. Quicker turnover meant less capital locked up in goods that were not yet sold. Speed became an advantage. Predictability became a necessity. This did not eliminate uncertainty. It relocated it. Instead of absorbing risks through storage, businesses began pushing it outward. Suppliers were expected to deliver more precisely. Transporters were expected to arrive on narrower windows. Ports were expected to process cargo faster with less room for error. Slack did not disappear. It was redistributed. What had once been held in warehouses became embedded in schedules. Buffer stock was replaced by buffer time. Coordination replaced accumulation. The economy did not suddenly become fragile. It became precise. That precision would eventually make global trade faster, cheaper, and more expansive than anything that came before it. It would also change how failure behaved. But that shift did not happen all at once. First, time had to become something that could be managed, priced, and enforced across oceans. And for that, schedules had to become profitable. Part 2. When schedules became profitable. Time did not become central to global trade because technology made it possible. It became central because economics made it necessary. As markets expanded and competition intensified, the cost of waiting grew harder to justify. Inventory that sat idle tied up capital that could be used elsewhere. Warehouses smoothed uncertainty, but they also hid inefficiencies that became increasingly expensive at scale. The turning point was not speed for its own sake, it was predictability. If arrival times could be trusted, inventory could be reduced. If handoffs could be coordinated, storage could be minimized. If timing could be enforced, capital could be freed. This is where schedules stopped being administrative details and started becoming financial instruments. Standardization played a critical role, but not in the way it is often described. Containerization is usually framed as a breakthrough in physical handling. Boxes that could be lifted cleanly from ship to truck to rail without repacking. That mattered, but it was only part of the story. The deeper shift was temporal. Standard containers made loading and unloading predictable. Predictability allowed ports to assign time slots. Time slots allowed labor to be scheduled precisely. Precise labor scheduling reduced idle time. Reduced idle time lowered costs. Once time could be planned, it could be sold. Shipping lines began offering arrival windows rather than rough estimates. Ports organized berths around schedules instead of queues. Contracts embedded timing commitments alongside price. A shipment was no longer just moved, it was booked. This changed how trade was organized. Instead of waiting for enough cargo to justify departure, ships sailed on fixed timetables. Instead of ports reacting to arrivals, they planned for them. Instead of warehouses absorbing variability, schedules attempted to eliminate it. The system began to resemble a calendar more than a map. These changes reinforced one another. As schedules became more reliable, businesses trusted them more. As trust increased, inventory was reduced further. As inventory fell, the cost of mistiming rose. Time started to carry value independent of distance. A late shipment was not just delayed. It disrupted labor plans, missed downstream connections, and wasted reserve capacity that could not be easily reused. A ship that arrived outside its window created gaps that echoed across the port's entire operating day. Efficiency gained in one place required discipline everywhere else. This is where coordination stopped being optional. Ports were no longer independent actors. They became nodes in a network whose performance depended on alignment with shipping lines, trucking companies, rail operators, and distributors. A missed commitment by any one participant created friction for all of them. Schedules tightened not because people wanted less flexibility, but because flexibility had become expensive. Idle cranes cost money. Idle trucks cost money. Idle labor cost money. Time that could not be planned became waste. The system rewarded those who could keep time reliably. It also punished those who could not. This did not eliminate uncertainty. Weather still interfered. Mechanical failures still occurred. Demand still shifted unexpectedly. What changed was how much room the system allowed to absorb those shocks. Slack was no longer free. It had to be justified, priced, and often eliminated. As scheduling became profitable, it also became invisible. When everything arrived as planned, nothing stood out. The system appeared smooth, even simple, but beneath that smoothness was a growing dependence on alignment. Every improvement in efficiency reduced tolerance for deviation. Every cost, saved through precision, increased sensitivity to delay. The economy gained speed and scale. It also tied itself more tightly to the clock. By the time just-in-time practices emerged as a formal philosophy, the groundwork had already been laid. Schedules were no longer conveniences, they were constraints. Time was no longer something the system reacted to, it was something the system was built around. Part 3. The quiet math of just-in-time. Just-in-time did not begin as a slogan, it emerged as a calculation. Once schedules became reliable enough to trust, businesses started asking a different question. If arrival could be predicted, why hold inventory at all? Inventory looks like security. On a balance sheet, it is risk. Goods sitting in a warehouse represent capital that is not working. They require space, labor, insurance, and oversight. They depreciate. They become obsolete. They hide problems upstream by absorbing delays rather than forcing them to be resolved. Just-in-time reframed that trade-off. Instead of treating inventory as insurance, it treated timing as insurance. Goods would arrive when needed, not before. Storage would shrink. Capital would stay liquid. Variability would be addressed through coordination rather than accumulation. This was not about speed. It was about alignment. A factory does not need parts early. It needs them on time. A retailer does not benefit from excess stock. It benefits from predictable replenishment. In both cases, inventory reduction is only possible if upstream commitments can be trusted. Just-in-time works by converting buffers into promises. Where warehouses once absorbed uncertainty, schedules now had to do the same work. Every link in the chain became responsible for arriving within a narrower window. Every delay became more consequential because there was less slack to absorb it. The math was compelling. Reducing inventory freed capital that could be invested elsewhere. Shorter lead times improve responsiveness to demand. Lower storage costs increased margins. Precision replaced excess. At scale, these gains were enormous. What is often misunderstood is that just-in-time does not eliminate risk, it redistributes it. Uncertainty does not disappear when inventory is removed, it moves outward. Suppliers carry more responsibility. Transporters operate under tighter constraints. Ports and warehouses become throughput systems rather than holding zones. Risk shifts from being pooled in storage to being shared across time. This makes the system feel lighter when it works and more brittle when it does not. The success of just-in-time depends less on perfection than on consistency. Small deviations can be managed. Large ones cannot. The system tolerates noise as long as it stays within expected bounds. What it cannot tolerate is drift. A shipment that arrives a day late once can be worked around. A pattern of lateness forces rescheduling everywhere else. Precision depends on trust, and trust depends on repetition. This is why just-in-time systems invest so heavily in forecasting, monitoring, and coordination. The work is not physical, it is administrative. Planning meetings, data integration, shared calendars, constant adjustment. The visible movement of goods is only the surface. Underneath, time is being managed continuously. Just-in-time also changes how problems are perceived. When inventory is abundant, disruptions are delayed. The system absorbs shocks quietly. Failures surface slowly, often far from their source. When inventory is thin, problems appear closer to where they originate. This can make modern supply chains feel fragile, even when they are functioning as designed. The system is not breaking more often, it is revealing stress sooner. Just-in-time favors early visibility over delayed discovery. It surfaces misalignment quickly because it has less tolerance for it. This is a feature, not a flaw, but it requires discipline to manage. The benefit is responsiveness. When timing holds, goods flow smoothly from origin to destination with minimal waste. When demand shifts, the system can adapt faster because it is not anchored to large stockpiles built for yesterday's assumptions. The cost is forgiveness. There is less room to be wrong, less time to recover from mistakes, less ability to absorb shocks without consequences. Just-in-time is often criticized as reckless. That critique misses the point. It is not an attempt to eliminate uncertainty. It is an attempt to control where uncertainty lives. By embedding risk into schedules rather than storage, the system gains efficiency and loses slack. That trade-off was accepted deliberately because, for most of the time, it pays. The modern economy does not run lean because it is careless. It runs lean because precision proved more profitable than excess, and because time, once it became predictable, became the most valuable buffer of all. Part 4. Ports as choreography. Ports are often described as crowded. That description misses what actually matters. Congestion is not primarily about space, it is about sequence. A modern port is a tightly ordered environment where nearly everything happens according to plan until it doesn't. Ships arrive with assigned windows, cranes are allocated in advance. Labor is scheduled in shifts designed to match expected volume. Trucks are booked into gates at specific times. Rail connections are timed to receive containers as they clear the yard. Nothing here is accidental. What looks like constant motion is actually a series of appointments being kept in rapid succession. When those appointments align, the port moves extraordinary volumes of cargo with little visible strain. When they do not, the same space can feel immobilized. This is why ports can appear congested even when ships are being worked continuously. A berth sitting empty for an hour is not unused capacity. It is missed time. A crane standing idle is not surplus. It is a broken sequence. A truck waiting outside the gate is not early or late in a neutral sense. It is misaligned with everything that was planned around it. The choreography depends on precision. Cranes are assigned to vessels based on expected discharge rates. Labor agreements determine how many moves can be made per shift. Yard space is allocated based on anticipated dwell time. None of these decisions is made in isolation. Each assumes that the others will behave as forecast. Paperwork matters as much as steel. Customs clearance, manifests, inspections, and release codes all have timing implications. A container that physically arrives on time but clears late creates the same disruption as one that arrives late. The box exists, but it cannot move. Ports are full of containers that are present but unusable. This is where coordination becomes human rather than mechanical. Schedulers adjust sequences when arrivals shift. Supervisors reassign labor when a vessel underperforms. Dispatchers reroute trucks to avoid bottlenecks. None of these actions makes headlines. They are the daily work of keeping time from slipping too far. Most days, these adjustments are enough. The system bends without breaking because small errors can be absorbed through reordering. A crane can be reassigned. A truck appointment can be shifted. A yard plan can be modified. But this flexibility is finite. When too many arrivals miss their windows, rescheduling becomes crowding. When too many containers dwell longer than expected, yard space tightens. When labor is committed to one sequence and another suddenly demands attention, trade-offs appear. The port does not fail, it accumulates friction. From the outside, this friction looks like delay. From the inside, it looks like decisions that no longer have good options. Ports are often blamed for global supply problems, but they are better understood as mirrors. They reflect misalignment that begins elsewhere. A ship delayed by weather compresses its downstream schedule. A factory shipping late pushes congestion forward. A retailer changing orders at the last moment pulls timing backward through the system. By the time the container reaches the port, many of the decisions that shaped its arrival have already been made. What ports do is make those decisions visible. When timing holds, ports disappear from public attention. When it does not, they become symbols of dysfunction even though they are still working continuously. The choreography is unforgiving because it is shared. One missed step does not just affect the dancer, it disrupts the pattern everyone else is following. This is why ports are not simply infrastructure. They are negotiation spaces. Every movement is an agreement being honored or adjusted. Every delay is a promise being renegotiated. The system depends less on perfect execution than on constant recalibration. When time aligns, the port hums. When it slips, the noise grows louder. And that noise is often mistaken for failure when it is actually the sound of a system working hard to keep moving forward. Part 5. When time slips. Delays in modern supply chains rarely arrive all at once. They accumulate. A ship misses its scheduled berth by a few hours. The delay does not stop the vessel from unloading. It shifts everything that was supposed to happen next. Cranes are reassigned. Labor runs longer or shorter than planned. Trucks miss their appointments and have to be rebooked. Rail connections are pushed to the next available slot. None of these adjustments is catastrophic on its own. The system keeps moving. What changes is that time stops behaving as expected. A missed window creates a gap that cannot always be reused. Port capacity is not like storage space that can be filled later. It exists at specific moments. When those moments pass unused, they are gone. This is how time debt forms. Each rescheduled move pushes another task into a tighter window. Each delay compresses what comes after it. The system compensates by stacking commitments closer together, assuming that recovery will happen downstream. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The difficulty is not the initial disruption, it is the recovery. Rebuilding alignment takes longer than losing it because schedules are interdependent. A container arriving late does not simply resume its original path. It enters a new queue with different priorities, different constraints, and different assumptions attached. Downstream actors adjust cautiously. A warehouse delays receiving inventory. It cannot process immediately. A retailer postpones promotions tied to expected arrivals. A manufacturer reshuffles production plans to work around missing components. These decisions ripple backward and forward through the system. The delay becomes less visible, but more embedded. From the outside, the effects feel sudden. Shelves empty quickly. Orders are backlogged without clear explanation. Availability shifts overnight even though the disruption occurred weeks earlier. This lag between cause and effect creates confusion. People look for a single failure, a blocked port, a labor shortage, a storm at sea. What they encounter instead is a system where no single moment explains the outcome. Time slips quietly. The structure does not collapse. It bends. Goods continue moving. Ships continue arriving. Ports continue operating. But alignment weakens and recovery becomes incremental rather than decisive. This is why restoring normal flow often takes longer than the original disruption. The system must work its way back into rhythm. Appointments have to be reset. Commitments have to be renegotiated. Trust in timing has to be rebuilt through repetition. There is no switch that restores synchronization. Only time itself can do that. Modern logistics excels at absorbing short-term variation. It struggles with prolonged misalignment because its efficiency depends on expectation. When that expectation erodes, behavior changes. Companies add precautionary buffers. Orders are placed earlier. Extra inventory is held temporarily. These adjustments are rational responses to uncertainty, but they also alter demand patterns, sometimes amplifying the very instability they are meant to avoid. The system becomes cautious. Not broken, not failing, just less confident. This is the point at which timing becomes visible to the public. Not when ships stop moving, but when the promise of availability can no longer be taken for granted. The economy continues to function. It simply does so without the quiet precision that made it feel effortless before. Part 6. The illusion of control. Modern economies look stable because their movement is hidden. Most people encounter trade only at the point of purchase. An item is either available or it isn't. The layers of coordination that determine that outcome are invisible by design. When they work, they remove friction from daily life. When they falter, the effects appear disconnected from their causes. This creates the illusion that availability is automatic. Shelves are stocked, deliveries arrive, and replacement parts can be ordered with confidence. These outcomes feel like the result of abundance rather than alignment. It is easy to assume that somewhere, out of sight, there must be reserves waiting to be drawn from. Often, there are not. What appears to be abundance is frequently timing. Goods arrive shortly before they are needed and move through systems quickly enough that they seem ever present. Retail spaces smooth this flow, presenting continuity even when inventory turns over completely in a matter of days. This smoothing delays perception. When timing begins to slip, the system absorbs the change quietly at first. Promotions are adjusted, substitutions are made, orders are fulfilled from alternative locations. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. Then, abruptly, it does. A product disappears from shelves across multiple stores at once. A delivery estimate stretches from days to weeks. A manufacturer announces a pause not because demand has fallen, but because a single component is unavailable. These moments feel sudden because visibility lags reality. The system does not fail overnight. It drifts out of alignment gradually, and the effects surface only when buffers at the very end of the chain are exhausted. By the time consumers notice, the underlying issue has already moved on. This lag fuels frustration and misunderstanding. People look for someone in control, a port authority, a shipping company, a government agency. The assumption is that if the system is coordinated, someone must be steering it centrally. In reality, control is distributed. No single actor oversees the entire timetable. Each participant manages their portion, relying on shared expectations about everyone else's behavior. The system holds together not because it is commanded, but because it is synchronized. That synchronization creates the appearance of control when it works. When it doesn't, the absence of a single point of authority becomes more visible than the coordination that usually hides it. This does not mean the system is chaotic, it means it is cooperative. Its stability comes from alignment, not dominance, from shared calendars, contracts, and habits that reinforce one another over time. When those habits are disrupted, rebuilding them requires patience rather than force. Attempts to impose control often miss this distinction. Adding inventory everywhere increases cost without restoring trust. Forcing throughput creates congestion rather than relief. Speeding one part of the system without adjusting the rest introduces new misalignment. Recovery depends less on command than on recalibration. Schedules have to settle. Expectations have to normalize. Commitments have to be kept consistently again before confidence returns. This is why periods of disruption feel longer than the events that caused them. The system is not just moving goods, it is restoring belief in timing. Until that belief is rebuilt, the economy operates more cautiously. Decisions are hedged, orders are spaced further apart. Buffers quietly reappear where they can. Control, in this sense, was never absolute. It was borrowed from repetition, and repetition, once interrupted, takes time to reestablish. Part 7. Time is the backbone. The modern economy does not move because things are plentiful. It moves because promises are kept. Every shipment, every delivery window, every replenishment cycle depends on an agreement about when something will happen. Those agreements are rarely visible, and they are almost never celebrated. They exist in schedules, contracts, calendars, and systems that quietly assume everyone else will do their part. Most of the time they do. That consistency is what makes global trade feel natural. Goods appear where they are expected. Production continues without interruption. Choice feels abundant because timing is dependable. This dependability is not accidental. It is maintained. Schedules are adjusted daily. Exceptions are managed. Delays are absorbed and corrected before they accumulate. People spend their working lives aligning plans with other plans, often without seeing the full structure they are supporting. What holds the system together is not speed or scale. It is trust in timing. When that trust exists, the economy can operate with remarkable efficiency. Inventory can stay low, capital can move freely, coordination can replace excess. The system becomes fast, responsive, and expansive. When that trust weakens, even briefly, the system does not collapse, it hesitates. Buffers reappear, decisions slow, caution replaces confidence. Goods still move, but the rhythm changes. The clock that once ran quietly in the background becomes audible. This is the nature of invisible systems. They are noticed, not when they function, but when their assumptions are tested. Not when they deliver value, but when that delivery becomes uncertain. The scheduling systems that govern global trade are not rigid because they are brittle. They are precise because precision proved more effective than redundancy for most of the time. That choice reshaped how economies work. It made coordination more important than accumulation. It made alignment more valuable than stockpiles. It turned time itself into infrastructure. Like all invisible backbones, this one requires care rather than applause, maintenance rather than reinvention, attention rather than spectacle. The economy does not run on motion alone. It runs on timing that people agree to honor, day after day, even when no one is watching. Subscribe to The Invisible Backbone. Long-form stories about the systems that quietly hold the modern world together, how they formed, why they matter, and what they are still shaping today.